Hello, my friends. This is Deepak Chopra. I have the distinct pleasure of speaking to Joseph Selbie. He's the author of this wonderful book, The Physics of God. And the subtitle here is How the Deepest Theories of Science Explain Religion and How the Deepest Theories of Religion Explain Science. I've been enjoying the book very much. So thank you very much, Joseph, for joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so, our audience would love to know a little bit about your background. And so why don't we start with that and then get to the book?
Okay. Well, I often tell people that my life sort of has been in two paths, and you could see them very clearly in my college career. So I went off to college, University of Colorado, thoroughly expecting to get a degree in science. And I got involved with a great department there in microbiology. And this is dating myself somewhat, but it was an exciting time because we were learning about how RNA moved messages from DNA into the ribosomes and created proteins. And this was all amazing new stuff. And it really lit me up, and I kept going in that direction. But as you know, with a science degree, you also have to take chemistry and biochemistry and mathematics. And so it was a heavy load to lift, but I was going that direction. And then about
Where was this? Where was this?
University of Colorado.
Okay, good. Thank you.
And about midway in my college years, I had a profound experience with a hallucinogenic drug, and it was life-changing.
Which one?
Honestly, I don't remember because this was not my first one, but it was the first one that really changed my perspective in such a profound way. And in fact, it was because I had taken other hallucinogenic drugs many times for what is generally known as recreational use. I realized even as it was happening that this wasn't about the drug, this was about me. Because if it was about the drug, every time I took the drug, I should have this experience, right? But in fact, this was a rarity. And I just felt wonderful. I felt the person I had always wanted to be emerged. I was loving, kind, open, and it lasted for days, the effects of it, and then gradually petered away. So that was maybe not the only influence that made me make my next decision, but was certainly significant. So the next decision I made was, do I really want to spend a life, with test tubes and in a lab or teaching about science? And I decided it wasn't, and I made this abrupt switch to Greek philosophy, and then eventually made a second abrupt switch, transferring to UC Berkeley, and majored in Indian history and Indian philosophy. So even though I made this change, both halves of that remain a significant part of me. I love science, have followed science, but where my heart took me was deeper and deeper into meditation, exploring spiritual realities, and that took me to becoming a part of the Ananda community in Northern California. And it's much more than that now, but at the time that was the center of it. And that was 46 years ago. So I've been with Ananda ever since. I've done all sorts of things, raised a family, started a business in web design, but always I had this awareness of how my knowledge of science complemented what I understood about spiritual realities and how spiritual realities that I had experienced complemented many of the things that science had to tell me. So they've both been there for many, many years. In fact, a significant stop along that path was your book, Quantum Healing, came along at just the right time to help me kind of further appreciate that connection between the two. So that's sort of my story. Been with Ananda for, as I say, 46 years, done a million different things. And in the last 15 years, I've been able to give my time to more specific research and writing along this theme.
So I've been reading the book, and so 46 years ago would be what? In the
1975-ish.
I see. So, I had my first experiences in the 60s, and you said something with what we call and entheogens, or some people call psychedelics. And we used to say, if you remember the 60s, then you weren't there.
Yes.
So now let's go over the chapters, because there's a lot in this book, and I have a lot of questions. It's a beautiful book, and it's actually very current in terms of cutting edge understanding of science, cosmology, quantum mechanics, and more. But just let's go over the 10 chapters and just say a few words about each chapter, if you don't mind. Okay, so the first chapter is called The Religion of Science. Why do you call it The Religion of Science?
Well, most people don't know, and it's rarely ever disclosed, that what most people think of as science, if somebody says casually to you in a conversation, science thinks this, or science says that, they're really talking about a very specific interpretation of scientific discoveries that is known as scientific materialism. So scientific materialism basically states there is and only can be matter and energy and matter and energy interactions. And that those two things can explain everything to do with reality. So science, in a very real way, has sort of put a wall around itself, and it won't venture outside those walls into anything that suggests there are realities beyond just matter and energy. So why I call it the religion of science is because the notion that matter and energy are the only things there are is a belief system. It's not something that's ever been proven. And in fact, there are a lot of discoveries that have been made. I know you've had Dean Radin on from the Noetic Sciences. His team have uncovered many, many discoveries in a very competent, very high level of quality science that indicate clearly there is something non-material that interconnects minds, that has cause and effect, measurable cause and effect, and yet it never gets any attention within mainstream science. Just ignore it. It's like automatically not true. One of my favorite things is that someone, maybe they did it deliberately, but if they didn't, it was a brilliant PR move for the scientific materialists, which is that everything else is named para. It's paranormal, it's parapsychology, it's paraphysics. And what most people think automatically, anything labeled paranormal is a fraud or unreal or has no basis in real science. So that's the religion of science. And it is something that walls them in and forces scientists who want to make a career within those walls into not even bringing up alternative theories. There's a famous story about Rupert Sheldrake offering a book to the scientific community that examined, I think it was 10, it could have been 20 different things that could be wrong with science. You know, that even though they were accepted to be right, there was the possibility in each one of these things that he enumerated that could be wrong because of, you know, certain arguments that could be made that it's not the whole picture. And
So,
he got a blistering. Go ahead.
no, are you finished?
Oh, just to finish that, he got a blistering reply from the senior editor for one of the most prestigious science journals, saying, "This is a book to be burned. The contents of this book are heresy." So for a scientist to label another scientist a heretic is a delicious irony. And it's an indication of just how committed they are to this belief system.
Okay, so, you know, as I read the title, Religion Science, I remember reading many years ago, and it's one of my favorite reads, is a conversation in 1930 between Einstein and Tagore. Tagore, of course, the Indian poet sage from Bengal, where your friend and our mutual friend Amit Goswami comes from. So Tagore was senior to Einstein by several years. He was a Nobel laureate in literature. Einstein was already a celebrity, having won the Nobel Prize in physics. And they met in 1930 in a place called Potsdam, outside of Berlin. And that conversation was written about in various places, even in, I believe, was also in the New York Times, although it got lost in the, you know, all that was happening in 1930 with the war coming on and Nazi Germany emerging, and the Holocaust after that, before Einstein escaped from Germany. And so the conversation starts with a very interesting comment by Einstein, where he says, there is the human view of the universe, and there is the scientific view of the universe. To which Tagore responded, but the scientific view of the universe is the human scientist's view of the universe. You forgot to include the word human. And then Einstein responded, you might be right, but science is my religion. So he said exactly what you said, and he conceded. But, you know, I've read that essay many times. And what I realize now, that conversation, is, you know, at that time, perhaps we didn't have a word for scientific realism, which is now called naive realism. So naive realism basically says that in order to do science, you have to presume that there is a world out there independent of our perception of it. And the world that you look at is exactly what it looks like to a human being. Forget what it might look like to an insect with 100 eyes, or to a bat that experiences the world as the echo of ultrasound, or a snake that navigates the universe through infrared, on and on. So naive realism says that the world, the picture of the world, is exactly the look of it, and the look of it is a human look of it, and it's the only correct look of it. And if humans disappeared, the universe would still be exactly the way we see it. And Einstein was known for another famous statement that people still argue about. And that is that he said, I believe the moon would still be there if no one was looking at it. And, people still argue about that. And the more I've thought about that, I've come to the conclusion that no human view, scientific or otherwise, can be true, because what we experience is a very narrow band of electromagnetic radiation, limited by our five senses. And the human eye can only see between 300 nanometers and say 800 nanometers. There's nothing sacred about that. There's a whole range of possible experiences to biological organisms on either side of the spectrum. So while naive realism, and which is now called scientific realism, they're interchangeable, is very good for creating all our technology, including the technology we're using right now on Zoom. It has nothing to do with reality. So even though I love the idea that, science corroborates some of the insights, and you have some amazing insights here, entanglement, quantum biology, non-local correlation, these are symbols of human experience in human consciousness. In the end, we can't say that the scientific or even this religious view is correct, because they're both methodologies for human experience. Why do we think that the human experience is the legitimate experience in a field of possibilities that has almost infinite modes of knowing and experience? I'd love your comment on that.
Well, as you know, that's been a philosophical conundrum for, as far back as philosophy goes, back to the Greeks, before the Greeks. And I think it has a certain important message for us, that our perception is not necessarily absolute. But I do think that another way to look at it is that we are relatively correct in our perception, and that we get feedback for that relative correctness from the fact that we can manipulate the world around us using the laws that have been discovered by science. So there is an objective ability that is shared. It's not just one person has this ability and none others, but it's shared by many, many people. But that when you transcend the physical body and physical senses in higher spiritual experiences, then what saints, sages, saviors, near-death experiencers will say is that that is only a small subset of reality that you're experiencing. And there is a much greater level of reality. But even that is not the absolute. The absolute, according to both philosophers and many Vedanta scholars and others, is the absolute is beyond form. It's beyond perception. It's beyond separation, that there can't be an object and a subject. There is only one. But I think it's useful that you have these relative stages that you can go through that have consistent laws, that have a reality to them in which you can function to, as again, I think is common to all saints and sages is to say, you're just here to learn. Don't worry too much about what it is or what you can accomplish within it or how true it might be. Learn to transcend it. And the way you learn to transcend it is by almost universally learning to get still enough and inwardly absorbed enough that you no longer are bombarded by sensory impression, sensory information, or that your mind is caught up in processing sensory experiences, human experiences, relationships, etc. And when you can get all that to subside, which is the core purpose of meditation, then what you experience is, could clearly be argued that the reality of through the senses that you'd been seeing before was illegitimate. It didn't really exist as you thought it did. But you can only really say that if you're experiencing the higher transcendent awareness.
I love the constructs in the book, and I think we won't have time to go through all of them because there's a time limit to our conversation for social media purposes, and we want everybody to read the book. So let me just read the titles of the chapters. Chapter 1, Religion of Science. Chapter 2, Science of Religion. Chapter 3, The Light Show, Illusion of Matter. Chapter 4, The Energy Verse and the Heavens. Chapter 5, Heaven is a Hologram. Chapter 6, Our Simultaneous Existence is Two Interpenetrating Realms. 7, The Intelligently Guided Cosmic Movie. 8, Ye Are Gods. 9, Rediscovering Our Godlike Potential. And 10, The Physics of God, a summary. So let me go to that last bit. And, in that Physics of God, a summary, you also end up with some beautiful quotes from both sages and scientists. And then you also explain meditation very elegantly. So I recommend this book to everyone. But let me share with you, and I would like your response to this, because I've now been studying the same material for probably as long as you have, if not longer. And I'm a very, very avid practitioner of meditation every day, 2-3 hours. I'm 75. I'm looking forward to my death, so I meditate on the last chapter of my life as well, what self-realization means. And here is my conundrum, and that is where I am right now. So if you look at the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali that I've studied forever, every single interpretation, every single practice, you begin with the yamas and niyamas, and then you have the other things, yogasana and pranayama and pratyahara and dharana, dhyan, samadhi. And at night, before I go to sleep, I practice yoga nidra. I do a lot of inquiry. I feel my body. I can easily experience myself without any effort as non-physical, amorphous, empty, formless, all of that I can. And yet, I don't know at this moment what reality is. I mean, I cannot, but we are told now, the scientific model, that there are 2 trillion galaxies, 2 trillion galaxies, that there are 700 sextillion stars. I don't even know how to write that. We're told that there are 60 billion possible habitable planets just in the Milky Way galaxy, based on what they call the Goldilocks zone. Given that on scale, planet Earth is a speck of not even a speck, not even a grain of sand in all the beaches of the world. So the other day I actually went to a beach and I tried to capture a grain of sand in my hand. It was impossible. You know, the moment you capture a grain of sand in your hand, it kind of drifts away. So that's planet Earth in all the beaches of the world. And on that is an organism called Homo sapiens, which on scale wouldn't be the size of COVID-19 or even that. This Homo sapiens has the gall, the guts to say that I can solve the mystery of existence either scientifically or through my religious experience. And so, you know, if you read the yamas and niyamas, the last of the niyamas is something called Ishwar Pranidhana, which means surrender to divinity, surrender to God. Depends on how you interpret the whole thing. Because God is such a loaded word, and everybody has their own version of God, even divine has a kind of a tainted label with cognitive and perceptual scientists. I now interpret Ishwar Pranidhana as surrender to mystery. I don't think a mystery can be solved. And all these attempts are very glorious and make me feel good, especially the whole idea of quantum entanglement, quantum biology, the fact that even our little body with 60 trillion cells and doing trillions of things every microsecond, how does it do it? How does a human body think thoughts, play a piano, kill germs, remove toxins, and make a baby all at the same time while tracking the movement of stars and planets? I come up with a mathematical explanation, quantum entanglement. But that's a human construct for another mode of human experience. And we know human experience is totally unreliable. After all, my experience tells me the earth is flat. Nobody believes that. My experience tells me your body and my body is solid. Nobody believes that. My experience tells me the ground is stationary and it's spinning at dizzying speeds and hurtling through space at thousands of miles an hour. So I say, okay, that's the perceptual Maya. We can now create a hadron collider, and we can take a snapshot of this thing called a Higgs boson. And by the time you look at the Higgs boson, it actually doesn't even exist. It's a perceptual cognitive snapshot with high-level technology. Now we say, oh, that gives mass to the universe. Are we just making ourselves feel good? I mean, is this mystery even solvable? And is not just surrender to mystery maybe the ultimate way? Because once you surrender to it, you're okay. There's joy.
Right. Well, I think that's the answer. I mean, that's the answer for me. I would not, believe me, have the temerity to tell you how to solve this problem for yourself. But for me, I don't know exactly when to say it became clearer, but it becomes clearer and clearer all the time and has been, gaining for decades, is that I'm never going to understand it all with my mind. I'm never going to be able to state in unequivocal words what reality is and how it works. But I do believe, and I believe it more and more, that I can feel it, that reality is experienced in the heart and not in the mind. And that the more I meditate, just as you were saying, I meditate every day, twice a day. I try to go as deep as I can in it. It's been something I've been doing for decades and decades. And I've had two benefits from it. One is that I have a clearer mind, but mainly because I have so much more of a heart experience of life. And that my favorite experiences are always with people who, share that, and you quickly start to feel that with each other, and you can laugh and joke, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you really know, because you really feel, and that feeling keeps growing. So I think for people who are, need the mind to reassure them in order to pursue the heart, I would say it's not absolutely a mishmash. It's not absolutely lawless. But ultimately, you prove those laws in personal inner experience, not in some, mental equation of getting reality described just right. So I don't know if that resonates for you, but it is what has been my experience.
It resonates, but what we call laws of nature are regularities of human experience. Is there a moon? If no one's looking at it, what's the moon to a horseshoe crab that lives at the bottom of the ocean, has never seen the moon, but still comes to the shore to mate on a full moon night? So, reality is very mysterious. And what we call laws of nature are just regularities of human experience. Would you agree?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I would maybe go further and say that biological laws are myriad and infinite, and that we'll never, ever figure them all out. As you were saying, we have trillions of cells, and they're all doing. Recently, I came across an estimate that there are 50,000 biochemical events taking place within a single cell every second. How can
cells are correlating their activity with every other cell?
Yes, and correlating their activity with every other cell. So how can we possibly understand that, just even about the human body, let alone every other aspect of life that exists? But I think we get a bit firmer grip through physics and through sort of what are often known as the hard sciences, where there are not that many variations. But even so, your point is true. I don't think we will ever know everything there is to know about this physical world, and that we don't need to.
In fact, the more we know, the more the unknown looms. I mean, it becomes bigger with every step of knowing. The unknowing is larger, bigger.
Yeah. And then you step away from that and you start asking the more fundamental physical questions about, such as, who is knowing anything? What does that mean? But it's hard to refute. The only way to refute that there is a knower is to suggest that you have no reality at all. And I don't think most people emotionally can go there, because being the knower is such a central part of every experience you ever have. Now, what that knower is, I believe, expands and expands and expands as you grow and transcend. But I don't think the knower ever goes away. And the knower knows by mind, and the knower knows by heart.
Who or what is the knower? When you say I, what do you mean? What do you're not obviously referring to Joseph Selbie, are you, when you say I?
Well, all of the above. But I think that the language you use to describe the higher states of who I am, I becomes less and less useful. I'm not speaking from experience of these realms of the absolute. I'm sharing my summation of many different schools of thought from many, many different religious paths, but that we are one with the infinite, however you want to define the infinite. And we are part of the absolute. We are inseparably a part of all that is. And that is the ultimate I, the ultimate knower. But the ultimate knower realizes that he's not separate, or she's not separate from the infinite, and never was. We just are learning to find our way back to that perception that we are one with the infinite. Meanwhile, we keep thinking we're separate, and that is our path. That's our process. So we're trying to get through that and learn it. When over and over and over, we tend to affirm that we are separate, and my opinion is more important than that person's opinion, or what I need is more important than what somebody else needs. And what, again, the saints and sages tend to say is that those distinctions just drop away, and you realize that you never were separate from all those other people. That's why the saints love unconditionally, is because they know that everybody is that same one love, that one same divine infinite substance. And that in that knowing, you don't need to be separate. There's nothing gained by being separate. We protect ourselves by being separate or thinking we're separate. But it's really just the opposite of what we should be doing. But it is a strong, strong part of human.
It is said that the knower and known are add-ons. There's only awareness bubbling with qualia, and that knower and known are just human constructs, but there is no knower and there's no known. There's just consciousness knowing itself. And we go to science and religion as methodologies, but those are also constructs in the same consciousness. And I am looking at the picture of His Holiness Yogananda in your back on your screen. Keep talking about the sages and sages and all these divine beings. But everything that we see, if it's an illusion, are the sages and divine avatars also part of the illusion?
Well, what I like to say about it being an illusion is that it's not that it doesn't exist. It's just not what you think it is.
Okay.
So the saints and sages are able to manifest bodies within that illusion to teach us how to get out of the illusion. But they will be the first to tell you that their bodies are not them.
This has been a wonderful conversation. I've enjoyed reading your book. And what do you hope people will get out of your book as they read it?
Well, I think I wrote it for two sort of groups of people. I wrote it for people who are science-oriented, but yet are drawn to the fact that there might be God, there might be higher consciousness, there might be something beyond what they experience through the senses, but have not been able to reconcile what appears to be a open and shut case by science that nothing else can exist other than matter and energy. And then I've also written it for those who already have that conviction that God exists, that an infinite consciousness exists, of which they are a part, but who would like to know that there's no separation between science and religion, who would like to know where they meet, where they intersect. And I have found, gratifyingly, both of people in those categories corresponding to me and discussing it or commending it for those two reasons. So it's very affirming for people who already believe there is a divine plan, there is a divine reality behind matter. It's very affirming for them, but it's very also opening for people who want to go through that door. There was a Pew Research study done in 2008, 2009, something like that, that said 41% of scientists were basically scientific materialists. But intriguingly, 51% of self-identified scientists said they believed in God and consciousness and a higher consciousness and a higher power. So there are a lot of scientists out there who would like to find a way to reconcile the two rather than having to say to themselves, well, I'm a scientist, so I'm going to do scientific things over here. But in my heart of heart, I'm going to believe this stuff over here about God, but never know how to put them together. I like to say to people that it's a book that connects the dots.
Very good. You know, they say that the essential religious experience is universally just three things. One is transcendence. The second is Platonic values like truth, goodness, beauty, harmony, love, compassion, joy, equanimity. And the third is the loss of the fear of death, because your true self is not subject to birth and death. Is that your experience?
My personal experience? I recently had an experience that kind of confirmed it. I was in a traffic accident, and the airbag on my side of the vehicle didn't pop. So it was just my seatbelt that saved me. And in the minutes after the accident, I realized that my neck was broken. My head was at a really peculiar angle and I couldn't lift it up. And gradually different parts of my body were going numb and I couldn't move them. And I heard one of the paramedics in the background saying, we got to get this guy to the hospital soon. He's going fast. But because of years of meditation and because of an experienced belief, not just a belief that I'm trying out, but something that I've proved to myself over and over again, I actually had no fear whatsoever. I was talking to Yogananda saying, well, if I'm going, I'm going. I didn't really expect this to happen. But I also said, but if you want me to stay, I would appreciate, a real powerful healing, because I don't want to live the rest of my life as a quadriplegic, which is what it was looking like since my neck was broken at the 6th cervical vertebra. But all through it, from accident to getting to the hospital, being in the hospital, fortunately no surgery, I never felt fear. And it made it so much easier to go through. It turned into a massive inconvenience rather than a massive emotional upset. And it was really tested hard, whether I really believed that or not, in the depths of my heart. And I did. So I think those summations of three things that are important, I would say they're pretty good.
My very special guest has been Joseph Selbie. His book is The Physics of God: How the Deepest Theories of Science Explain Religion and How the Deepest Theories of Religion Explain Science. Please pick it up and you will be enlightened. Thank you very much, Joseph, for joining me.
Thank you, Deepak. My honor to be on your show.
Thank you.